It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and Alex could feel his heart racing as he walked toward the cafe where he had arranged to meet Emma. The small, cozy spot had been their regular hangout for months. Today, however, wasn't just any casual get-together. Today, Alex planned to confess his feelings to her. He had known Emma for over a year now. They had met at a mutual friend's party, and since then they had become close, texting regularly and hanging out almost every weekend. For Alex, it was more than just friendship. Emma had quickly become the person he thought about every day. The one who made him believe in a future filled with love and happiness. But there had always been a nagging doubt in the back of his mind, a doubt rooted in his own circumstances. Alex was broke. After his father's business collapsed, his family had struggled to make ends meet. He had been working several part-time jobs to help support his family while trying to finish his degree, hoping to one day make something of himself. He didn't have the flashy lifestyle or financial security that Emma often talked about. Still, he believed that his love for her, his work ethic, and his plans for the future would be enough to win her heart. As he approached the cafe, Alex took a deep breath, rehearsing what he would say. He had planned everything carefully. Today was the day he would finally tell Emma how he felt. He knew she was looking for stability, but he hoped she could see beyond his financial struggles and see the man he was becoming. After all, love was about more than money, wasn't it? He spotted Emma at their usual table, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she sipped her iced latte. She looked stunning as always, confident, carefree, and perfect in every way. Alex felt a pang of nervousness as he approached, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to be honest with her. "Hey, Alex." Emma smiled warmly as he sat down across from her. "You look like you've got something on your mind." Alex smiled back, though the knot in his stomach tightened. "Yeah, actually, I do. I wanted to talk to you about something important." Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's up?" Alex took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Emma. You know, we've been spending a lot of time together, and I really like you. I think we could be more than friends." Emma's smile faltered for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Alex," he could feel the tension rise between them as he continued. "I know I'm not where I want to be financially, but I'm working hard. I have big plans for the future, and I believe I can give you the life you deserve. I just need some time." Emma's face softened for a brief moment, but then she sighed, setting her drink down. "Alex, you're sweet, but I don't think this is going to work." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He blinked, trying to process what she had just said. "What do you mean?" Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her gaze falling to the table. "It's just, you're a great guy, but I need more than just potential. You're still struggling, working part-time jobs. I'm not trying to be shallow, but I want stability. I need someone who can provide for the kind of future I see for myself. And right now, that's not you." Alex's heart sank. He had known that money was important to Emma, but he had hoped she could look past his current situation and see his ambition, his determination to succeed. "But Emma, I'm working towards something. I'm not going to be in this position forever. I just need time." "I understand that, Alex," Emma said gently. "But I can't wait around hoping that things will change. I'm looking for someone who's already got his life together." Alex felt his throat tighten. "So, that's it? You're rejecting me because I'm broke?" Emma hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'm sorry, Alex. I just don't see us going anywhere." For a long moment, Alex sat there in stunned silence. He had imagined this conversation going so differently. He had envisioned Emma telling him she believed in him, that she could see a future with him despite his current struggles. But instead, he was being dismissed, rejected for not having enough money. Emma stood up, her expression apologetic but resolute. "I hope we can still be friends, Alex. You're a good guy, but I need more than just potential." Alex forced a weak smile. "Yeah, sure." She gave him a small nod, then turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him sitting alone with a heavy weight in his chest. As the door swung shut behind her, Alex's mind raced with emotions, sadness, frustration, anger. But beneath it all, there was something else. Determination. Emma might have rejected him now, but Alex knew he wasn't going to stay down forever. He would work harder than ever before. He would build a future for himself, not just for love, but for his own sense of worth. Someday, he vowed, Emma would realize the mistake she had made. As he sat there, staring at his untouched coffee, Alex made a silent promise to himself. He would prove her wrong, and one day, he would be the man she wished she had chosen. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in the cafe. Alex stood at the window of his office, overlooking the city skyline, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. It had been a long, grueling road, but he had made it. The young man who had once been rejected for being broke was now the CEO of one of the most successful up-and-coming tech companies in the industry. The once heartbroken and financially struggling Alex had transformed into a man of power, influence, and wealth. After Emma had walked out of his life, Alex had thrown himself into his work with a focus and drive that even he hadn't known he possessed. His part-time jobs had quickly turned into full-time hustles, and before long, he had stumbled upon an opportunity to start a small tech venture with a few like-minded friends. The initial days were tough, working long hours, making sacrifices, and living on minimal income. But Alex had a vision, and that vision pushed him through the hardest of times. "I'll never forget what that felt like," Alex murmured to himself as he thought back to those days when success seemed like a distant dream. He remembered nights spent coding until his eyes burned, scraping together funds to pay his employees, and dealing with rejection after rejection from investors. But through it all, Alex had kept one thing at the forefront of his mind. He would prove himself, not only to the world, but also to himself. He would be more than what people saw on the surface. And then the breakthrough had come. The right product, the right timing, and the right market. Investors finally took notice, and within a few years, the company had exploded onto the scene. What started as a small, scrappy startup had quickly grown into a major player in the tech industry. Alex had become a multimillionaire before his 30th birthday, a man respected for his business acumen and admired for his rise to success. He was no longer the broke young man who had been rejected by Emma. He was a self-made success story. But despite all of his achievements, Alex couldn't help but think of her from time to time. Not because he still harbored feelings for her, but because Emma's rejection had been the catalyst for everything. Her dismissal had lit a fire in him that never went out. In a strange way, Alex was grateful. It had pushed him to achieve more than he had ever thought possible. One afternoon, as Alex was reviewing some documents, his assistant Rachel knocked lightly on the door. "Mr. Williams, you have a meeting scheduled with the management team in 15 minutes, she reminded him. "Thanks, Rachel," Alex replied, glancing at the clock. "I'll be right there." As Rachel turned to leave, she hesitated for a moment, then said, "By the way, I heard some chatter around the office that you'll be visiting the satellite branch tomorrow. The staff there are excited to finally meet you in person." Alex smiled. "It'll be good to meet the team. It's been a long time coming." Rachel nodded and left the room, leaving Alex to his thoughts. The satellite branch was one of the company's newer acquisitions, a major corporation that had fallen on hard times before Alex's company had stepped in to restructure and revitalize it. The process had been swift and effective, and Alex had kept a close eye on its progress. He had purposefully stayed out of the spotlight, allowing his managers to handle day-to-day operations. But now it was time for him to visit and see the changes firsthand. The next day, Alex arrived at the satellite branch, a large office building that housed hundreds of employees. As he stepped out of his sleek black car, the employees inside the building buzzed with excitement. They had heard of the young CEO's success story, and the rumors about his tenacity and drive had made their way through the ranks. Everyone was eager to meet him. Alex entered the building, greeted by a flurry of handshakes, smiles, and eager faces. As he walked through the halls, the employees marveled at his presence. He was the epitome of success, the kind of leader they admired from afar. Alex made his way to the conference room for a scheduled meeting with the department heads. As he entered the room, his eyes scanned the table, acknowledging the faces of the team members. But then his gaze froze on one person. A woman sitting at the far end of the table, her head down, scribbling something in her notebook. It was Emma. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen her in years, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she recognized him. Her hair was a little shorter now, and there was a weariness in her face that hadn't been there before. But it was unmistakably her. The woman who had rejected him for being broke was now sitting at the table, working at a company that he owned. The irony wasn't lost on Alex. Emma hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on her work. But as the meeting began and introductions were made, she finally looked up, and her eyes met Alex's. For a split second, she froze, her face going pale as recognition dawned on her. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Alex could see the shock in her expression, the disbelief that he was the one standing at the head of the table. There was no mistaking it. She knew who he was. Alex, keeping his composure, nodded politely, continuing with the meeting as though nothing had happened. But inside, a storm of emotions was brewing. He hadn't expected this moment. Seeing Emma again, after all these years, stirred something deep within him. After the meeting, as employees filed out of the room, Emma lingered at the back. Alex could feel her eyes on him, and he knew what was coming. Sure enough, after the room had cleared, Emma approached him, her expression a mix of surprise and hesitation. "Alex," she began, her voice shaky. "I didn't know you were… I had no idea." Alex turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "That I own the company?" he finished for her, his voice calm but firm. Emma nodded, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Yeah, I can't believe it. You've really made something of yourself." For a moment, Alex didn't respond. He simply looked at her, his mind flashing back to that day in the cafe when she had dismissed him for being broke. So much had changed since then, and yet, standing in front of her now, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. "Yes," he finally said, his voice steady. "I have." Emma looked down, unable to meet his gaze. I made a mistake, Alex." Alex stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She was right, she had made a mistake, but that was in the past. He wasn't the same person he had been back then, and neither was she. "Maybe," Alex said softly. "But that's life, isn't it?" The room fell into a tense silence, as Alex and Emma stood facing each other, the weight of the past hanging heavily between them. Alex had thought about this moment many times over the years. What he would say if he ever saw Emma again, how he would react. But now that the moment had arrived, it didn't feel the way he had imagined. Instead of anger or satisfaction, he felt conflicted. Emma, on the other hand, looked overwhelmed. Her face was a mixture of shock, regret, and embarrassment. She had never expected to see Alex again, let alone discover that he had become the owner of the company where she worked. It was a cruel twist of fate, one that made her stomach churn with anxiety. "I didn't know," Emma repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea this was your company. Alex, You don't have to explain anything to me, Emma," Alex interrupted, his voice calm but firm. He wasn't interested in hearing excuses or apologies, at least not right now. It's been a long time. Emma swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room before landing back on him. "I know, it's just, I can't believe how much has changed. You've come so far." Alex nodded slowly. "I've worked hard. I had to." The statement hung in the air, and Emma shifted uncomfortably, understanding the weight of what he was implying. She remembered how hardworking Alex had always been, even back when they were younger. But back then, she hadn't seen the value in his potential. She'd been focused on the present, on what he could provide at that moment, and she had walked away from someone who had the ambition and determination to succeed. "I'm sorry, Alex," Emma said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I was wrong. I made a mistake. I didn't see who you really were back then." Alex raised an eyebrow, feeling a flicker of something he hadn't expected: sympathy. He had envisioned this moment for years, imagining how satisfying it would be to watch Emma realize what she had missed out on. But now that it was happening, he didn't feel the sense of victory he had expected. Instead, he saw a woman who had been blinded by superficial desires, now standing before him, clearly filled with regret. "It's in the past," Alex said, trying to sound indifferent. "We've both moved on, haven't we?" Emma hesitated, looking down at the floor. "I thought I had, but seeing you now, I realize I was wrong about so many things, about you, about myself." Alex studied her for a moment, seeing the vulnerability in her posture, the regret in her voice. He could tell she was sincere, But that didn't change what had happened between them. She had made her choice and he had made his. The man standing before her now wasn't the same boy she had rejected all those years ago. "You don't need to apologize, Emma," Alex said, his tone softening slightly. "You made the decision that was right for you at the time. I don't hold it against you." Emma looked up at him, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "But I do," she whispered. "I hold it against myself. I've spent years wondering what would have happened if I had chosen differently, if I had seen what you were capable of." Alex felt a pang of empathy, but he kept his expression neutral. "You didn't know," he said simply, "and neither did I. I didn't know where life would take me or what I'd become, but I've learned a lot since then." Emma shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't expected Alex to be so composed, so kind. She had feared he would be angry, or worse, indifferent. But instead he seemed almost understanding. It made her feel even worse about the choices she had made. "Can we talk?" Emma asked hesitantly. "Just for a few minutes? I'd really like to explain myself. Not that it changes anything, but I feel like I owe you that." Alex paused, glancing at the clock on the wall. He had a meeting in half an hour, but something in Emma's voice made him reconsider. Maybe hearing her out would bring him the closure he hadn't realized he needed. He nodded toward the empty chairs in the conference room. "All right," Alex said, gesturing for her to sit. "Let's talk." Emma sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in her lap. Alex remained standing for a moment before taking the seat across from her, his expression calm but curious. "I know this probably seems pointless," Emma began, her voice quiet. "But I've spent years thinking about what happened between us, about the way I treated you. And I regret it, Alex. I regret it every day." Alex remained silent, letting her speak. "I was young and stupid back then," Emma continued, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. "I was so focused on money, on status, on what I thought I deserved. I didn't see the person you were, the person you could become, and I hurt you. I know I did." Alex's jaw tightened slightly, memories of that painful day in the cafe flashing through his mind. He had been devastated by her rejection, but he had also used it as fuel to push himself harder. In a way, Emma had helped him, even if she didn't realize it. "I'm not the same person I was back then," Emma said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Life hasn't turned out the way I expected. I chased after wealth and security, but I never found happiness. And now I'm sitting here realizing that the person I rejected all those years ago is the person who became everything I was looking for." There it was. The truth. Alex took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of emotions, sympathy, sadness, and maybe even a little vindication. But more than anything, he felt relief. Hearing Emma's words, acknowledging the pain he had carried with him for so long, gave him the closure he hadn't known he needed. "I appreciate your honesty," Alex said quietly, his voice calm. "But the truth is, I'm not the person I was back then either. I've changed. We've both changed." Emma nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know, and I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the past finally settling between them. Alex knew he could never go back to what they once had. Too much had changed. But he also knew that forgiving her and himself was the only way to move forward. "You don't need to apologize anymore, Emma," Alex said softly. "We've both learned a lot since then." Emma looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alex. That means more than you know." As the weight of Emma's apology hung in the air, Alex leaned back in his chair, looking at her carefully. There was sincerity in her eyes, but the years had changed him too much to let the past sway him. This wasn't just about their history. This was about who they had both become. Emma, visibly emotional, sat quietly, waiting for Alex's next words. She had thought about this moment for years, running through different versions of how it might play out. But now that it was happening, she wasn't sure what to expect. Alex's calm, almost detached demeanor left her feeling even more regretful. She had anticipated anger, maybe even bitterness. Instead, there was a maturity in him that she hadn't anticipated, and it made her feel even smaller. "I appreciate your apology, Emma," Alex said after a long pause. "But I'm not the same person I was back then. I've moved on, and I've learned a lot along the way. Life didn't go easy on me after you left. I had to fight for everything I have now. Emma nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. I know, Alex, and I respect everything you've built. She hesitated, searching for the right words. I just want you to understand that my rejection wasn't about you. It was about me, about the life I thought I wanted. Alex's expression didn't change. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore, and hearing her side of the story, as much as it stirred old wounds, was necessary for them both. We all make choices, Emma. You chose what you thought was right for you at the time. I get it. But I chose my own path after that, and honestly, I'm glad I did. Emma blinked, surprised by his words. You're glad? Alex nodded slowly. Yes, when you walked out of my life, it hurt. I won't lie about that. But it gave me the push I needed to work harder, just to prove to myself that I could succeed. Maybe at the time, I was trying to prove something to you too, but along the way, I realized that this journey was about me, not about proving anything to anyone else. Emma swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words sink in. She had always assumed that Alex would be bitter, that he would harbor resentment for how she had treated him. But now she realized that Alex's transformation wasn't about her at all. It had always been about his own growth, his own ambition, and that made her feel both relieved and sad at the same time. I'm proud of you, Emma said softly, her voice trembling. I know that might not mean much now, but I want you to know that you've built something incredible, and I can see that you're happy. Alex smiled faintly, though there was a sadness in his eyes that he couldn't quite shake. I am happy, but it wasn't always easy, and there were times when I thought about what you said about not being enough. Those words stuck with me. But eventually, I realized that the only person I needed to be enough for was myself. Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. I was so wrong, Alex. I judged you based on things that didn't matter, and I missed out on knowing the real you. Alex looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe. But we can't change the past, Emma. What's done is done. You were right in a way. I wasn't ready back then. I didn't have the stability or the success I have now. But life has a funny way of working out. I needed that rejection to push me toward where I am today. Emma wiped away a tear, her voice breaking as she spoke. I wish I had seen that potential in you sooner. I wish I hadn't been so focused on money and status. Maybe things could have been different. Alex's smile grew sadder. Maybe. But life doesn't always give us second chances like that. And honestly, I think it worked out the way it was supposed to. I needed to learn that my worth wasn't tied to what other people thought of me, and I think you needed to learn that too. Emma nodded, her heart heavy with regret. She had spent so many years chasing after wealth and stability, thinking that those were the keys to happiness. But now, looking at Alex, someone who had found success through hard work, determination, and integrity, she realized how misguided she had been. Do you hate me? Emma asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Alex shook his head. No, Emma, I don't hate you. I did for a while, I won't lie, but I've grown since then. We've both grown, and holding on to hate doesn't do anyone any good. Emma looked at him with a mixture of relief and sadness. I don't expect anything from you, Alex. I just needed you to know how sorry I am. I know, Alex replied, his tone soft but firm. And I appreciate it, but you don't owe me anything, Emma. We've both moved on. For a moment, they sat in silence, the tension between them finally easing. There was a sense of closure in the air, the kind that had been long overdue. Emma had carried the weight of her past decisions for years, and now, in this moment, she felt a release, a sense of acceptance that she hadn't expected. I guess this is where we part ways then, Emma said, her voice laced with a bittersweet tone. Alex nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. Emma stood up, smoothing out her skirt as she prepared to leave. Thank you, Alex, for hearing me out, and for being the bigger person. Alex stood as well, offering her a nod of understanding. Take care of yourself, Emma. As Emma turned to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back at him one last time. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also a sense of peace. She had finally said what she needed to say, and she knew now that the man standing before her was no longer the boy she had once rejected. He was someone else entirely, stronger, wiser, and far more successful than she had ever imagined. I hope you find happiness, Alex, Emma said softly before stepping out of the room. I already have, Alex whispered to himself as the door closed behind her. After Emma left the room, Alex sat back down, feeling an unexpected wave of relief wash over him. The confrontation that he had anticipated for years had come and gone, not in the explosive or triumphant way he had imagined, but with a quiet understanding that felt right. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace with the past. Emma's apology, though emotional, had been necessary for both of them. Alex sat quietly, staring at the table in front of him, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had spent so much time building his career, proving to himself and the world that he could succeed. In a way, Emma's rejection had driven him, fueling the fire that led to his success. But now, he realized that the person he had become wasn't defined by that rejection. It had been a part of his story, yes, but it didn't define his worth. As the day wore on, Alex turned his attention back to the business at hand. There was still work to be done, and as CEO, he had responsibilities that couldn't wait. He met with his managers, discussed strategies, and focused on the future of the company. But something about the encounter with Emma lingered in his mind, not as a burden, but as a reminder of how far he had come. That evening, as Alex sat in his office reviewing some documents, his assistant Rachel knocked on the door. "Mr. Williams," she said softly, stepping inside. "I just wanted to let you know that the team was really impressed with your visit today. They're excited about the direction the company is headed." Alex smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that." Rachel paused, hesitating for a moment. "There's one more thing," she added, glancing down at her notepad. "There's been a request for a promotion in the marketing department, from Emma." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Emma?" Rachel nodded. "She's been with the company for a few years now, and based on her performance reviews, she's been doing quite well. The department head is recommending her for a promotion to a senior position." Alex sat in silence for a moment, processing this new information. Emma had never mentioned anything about her role in the company during their conversation earlier. He hadn't expected her to, but now knowing that she had been working hard behind the scenes, he found himself feeling proud. Not for her success, but for the fact that she had clearly grown since the last time they had been in each other's lives. Rachel watched him carefully. "Should I move forward with the promotion process?" Alex thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, go ahead. If she's earned it, she deserves the opportunity." Rachel smiled, clearly pleased with the decision. "I'll take care of it. And, Mr. Williams, I think it's a good call." After Rachel left the office, Alex leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. Promoting Emma felt like a final step in their story, a way to close the chapter on the past and move forward in a more mature, respectful way. He didn't owe her anything, but he also didn't believe in holding people back. If Emma had worked hard and earned her place, he wasn't going to stand in her way. The next few weeks passed quickly, and Emma's promotion was finalized. Though Alex hadn't interacted with her since their conversation, he heard from colleagues that she had accepted the new role with grace and was already thriving in her new position. Word spread through the company about her competence and leadership skills, and Alex couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she was finding her own path. One day, as Alex was leaving the office, he ran into Emma in the hallway. She was speaking with a few colleagues, clearly confident and respected in her new role. When she spotted him, their eyes met briefly, and for a moment, Alex wasn't sure if they would acknowledge each other. But then, Emma smiled, a small, sincere smile, and gave him a nod of acknowledgement. Alex smiled back, offering a nod of his own before walking past her. It was a simple exchange, but it carried a deeper meaning. There was no longer any tension, no lingering bitterness or regret. They had both moved on, both grown into the people they were meant to be. As Alex walked out of the office that evening, he felt a sense of lightness that he hadn't felt in years. He had achieved more than he ever thought possible, not just in his career, but in his personal growth as well. Emma's rejection had once been a source of pain, but now it was simply a part of his story, one that had shaped him, but not defined him. The turning point had come not in his financial success, but in his ability to let go of the past and recognize the importance of growth, both his own and Emma's. He had proven to himself that he was capable of great things, and he no longer needed validation from anyone else. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Alex felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. Life had come full circle, and he was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Months had passed since Emma's promotion, and life at the company had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Alex had been focused on expanding the business, pushing new innovations, and exploring untapped markets. His reputation as a visionary leader had only grown, and the company was on a clear path to even greater success. Yet, beneath all the professional triumphs, there was a deeper sense of fulfillment that came from his personal journey. One evening, as Alex sat in his office wrapping up for the day, he reflected on everything that had transpired in the past few months. His encounter with Emma had been unexpected, but it had ultimately given him something he hadn't realized he needed: closure. It had been the final piece of the puzzle in his long path to self-acceptance. Alex looked out the window at the glowing city skyline, a faint smile playing on his lips. He had come a long way from the young, broke man who had been rejected for not having enough. He had built something incredible, not just in his career but in his own character. He no longer felt the need to prove himself to anyone. He had found peace with who he had become. Meanwhile, Emma was thriving in her new role. She had earned the respect of her peers, working hard and bringing fresh ideas to the table. Her promotion had given her the confidence she had long lacked, and she was finally finding fulfillment in her work. Though she often thought back to her conversation with Alex, she didn't dwell on it with regret anymore. Instead, she saw it as a turning point in her life, an opportunity for growth. One afternoon, while working on a project, Emma received an email from Alex's assistant inviting her to a company-wide celebration. It was the company's annual Success Gala, where employees were recognized for their contributions and milestones were celebrated. She smiled as she read the email. It would be her first time attending the event as a senior member of the company. The night of the gala arrived, and the venue was packed with employees, investors, and industry leaders. The room buzzed with excitement as everyone mingled, celebrating the year's successes. Alex stood at the front of the room, surrounded by his leadership team, addressing the crowd with his usual calm confidence. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the company's success, but the hard work and dedication of every single person in this room," Alex said, his voice carrying through the hall. This company was built on the idea that, with the right mindset, perseverance, and belief in ourselves, we can achieve anything. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. The crowd erupted in applause, and Alex smiled, nodding in acknowledgement. As the evening continued, employees mingled, and the atmosphere was one of celebration and pride. At one point during the night, Alex noticed Emma standing by the bar, chatting with a few colleagues. She looked happy, more at ease than he had ever seen her. She had found her place, not just in the company, but in her life, and Alex was genuinely pleased to see it. As their eyes met across the room, Emma gave him a small smile, and Alex returned it. There was no need for words anymore. Everything that had needed to be said had already been spoken. They were both in different places now, having grown from their past and moved forward. Later that evening, as Alex stepped outside for some fresh air, Rachel approached him with a glass of champagne in hand. "You look like a man who's finally found peace," she said with a smile, handing him the glass. Alex chuckled softly, taking the drink. "I think you might be right. It's been a long journey, but I feel like everything's finally come full circle." Rachel nodded, glancing around at the lively celebration inside. "You've built something incredible here, Alex, and it's not just about the company, it's about the way you've led it. People respect you, not just for your success, but for the way you treat them." Alex smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. "That means a lot, Rachel. I've always believed that success isn't just about money or power, it's about how you grow as a person." Rachel raised her glass. "To growth, then." "To growth," Alex echoed, clinking his glass with hers. As the night wore on, Alex found himself standing alone on the balcony, looking out over the city. The cool breeze swept through the air, and he breathed deeply, feeling a sense of contentment he hadn't known he was searching for. This wasn't the life he had imagined back when he was broke and struggling, but it was better. It was real. He thought back to the younger version of himself, the man who had been rejected, who had doubted his worth. That rejection had once felt like the end of the world, but now, standing here, he saw it as the beginning of something much greater. It had set him on a path to self-discovery and success, not because of anyone else, but because he had believed in himself when no one else had. In the end, Alex realized that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It wasn't about getting revenge or making someone regret their choices. True success was about growing, learning, and becoming the person you were meant to be, and that's exactly what he had done. As Alex took one last look at the city below, a calm smile crossed his face. The past no longer held any power over him. He had moved forward, and the future was wide open.